Every dollar saved for retirement represents hours of human labor stored away for the future. But what happens when the container holding that stored value slowly leaks? When an individual transitions from the workforce into retirement, they cross a profound financial threshold. They stop trading time for income and begin relying entirely on the resources they have accumulated alongside the social safety nets provided by the state. In a stable economic environment, this transition requires straightforward arithmetic. But the modern economic environment is defined by a constant, gradual expansion of the money supply, resulting in rising prices. This force is inflation. For Canadian retirees, inflation is not merely a headline in the financial news. It is a mechanical erosion of purchasing power that directly threatens financial independence. Inflation is often described as an invisible tax. Unlike income tax or sales tax, which are legislated and line-itemed on receipts, inflation operates silently in the background. It alters the fundamental unit of measurement. $100 today buys fewer goods and services than it did a decade ago, and it will buy even less a decade from now. For a working professional, inflation is mitigated by wage growth. As the cost of living rises, employers typically adjust salaries upward to remain competitive. But for a retiree, the primary engine of income generation, their labor, has been turned off. The true danger of inflation in retirement lies in its compounding nature. Over a single year, a 2% or 3% rise in prices might seem manageable, perhaps requiring only minor adjustments to a household budget. Over a 25-year retirement, however, that same seemingly low rate of inflation will cut the purchasing power of a fixed income in half. Furthermore, the official inflation rate, measured by Statistics Canada through the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, may not accurately reflect the lived reality of a retiree. The CPI tracks a standardized basket of goods and services, including housing, transportation, food, and electronics. Retirees typically consume a different basket of goods than the broader population. Their mortgage may be paid off, eliminating the impact of rising interest rates on home loans, but they tend to spend a significantly higher percentage of their income on healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and property maintenance, sectors that historically experience inflation rates higher than the national average. This discrepancy creates a personal inflation rate for seniors that can often outpace the official statistics. Recognizing the devastating impact that unchecked inflation would have on the elderly, the Canadian government has built inflation protection directly into its foundational retirement programs. The two primary pillars of the public retirement system are the Canada Pension Plan, or CPP, and Old Age Security, or OAS. Both are indexed to inflation, but they are calculated and applied using completely different mechanisms. The Canada Pension Plan is a contributory, earnings-related social insurance program. Forms the bedrock of retirement income for most Canadians who have participated in the workforce. By law, CPP benefits are adjusted once a year, every January, to keep pace with the cost of living. This adjustment is based on the Consumer Price Index All Items Index. For the calendar year 2026, the federal government confirmed a CPP benefit increase of 2.0%. However, it is crucial to understand the mathematical lag built into this calculation. The January 2026 adjustment is not based on the inflation happening in January 2026. Instead, it is calculated by comparing the average CPI from November 2024 to October 2025 against the average CPI from the previous 12-month period. This trailing average smooths out volatility, preventing sudden spikes or drops in pension income. But it also means that during periods of rapidly accelerating inflation, retirees will experience a temporary loss of purchasing power. Cost of groceries and utilities will rise in real time, but the CPP adjustment will not arrive until the following January to compensate for the previous year's price hikes. If the cost of living ever decreases, the legislation dictates that CPP benefits remain frozen. They are never reduced. Old age security operates differently. OAS is a universal pension financed from general government revenues, available to most Canadians aged 65 and older who meet residency requirements. Because OAS is designed as a fundamental anti-poverty measure, its inflation adjustments are applied quarterly in January, April, July, and October. This quarterly indexation makes OAS far more responsive to immediate price shocks than the CPP. When inflation surges, OAS recipients see their payments adjusted within a matter of months, rather than waiting for the next calendar year. The Guaranteed Income Supplement, or GIS, which provides additional non-taxable support to low-income OAS pensioners, is also indexed quarterly. While the public pillars of CPP and OAS offer robust, guaranteed inflation protection, they were never designed to replace a worker's full pre-retirement income. For the average Canadian, government benefits only cover a fraction of their living expenses. The remainder must come from workplace pensions and personal savings. This is where inflation exacts its heaviest toll. In Canada, workplace pensions generally fall into two categories: defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. Federal public servants, teachers, and some municipal workers are often covered by defined benefit plans. These plans guarantee a specific monthly payout for life, and many of them, such as the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan or the Federal Public Service Pension, include built-in inflation adjustments. For these retirees, their primary income source is insulated against the eroding effects of price increases. The reality for the vast majority of private sector workers is starkly different. They rely on defined contribution plans, registered retirement savings plans, or RRSPs, and tax-free savings accounts, or TFSAs. In these accounts, the worker bears all the investment and inflation risk. $1 million RRSP portfolio is a static pool of capital. It does not automatically adjust itself when the price of fuel or electricity goes up. When managing a personal portfolio in retirement, the critical metric is not the nominal rate of return, but the real rate of return. If a retiree holds their savings in conservative instruments like guaranteed investment certificates or GICs paying 4%, but inflation is running at 3%, their real rate of return is merely 1% before taxes. Once taxes are applied to the interest income, the true purchasing power of that capital is actively shrinking. This dynamic forces retirees into a difficult mathematical corner regarding withdrawal rates. The financial industry has long referenced the 4% rule, a historical guideline suggesting that a retiree can safely withdraw 4% of their initial portfolio value in the first year of retirement and adjust that dollar amount upward for inflation each subsequent year, without running out of money over a 30-year timeline. Under high inflation, this rule accelerates portfolio depletion. If an individual has a $1 million portfolio and withdraws $40,000 in year one, a subsequent year of 5% inflation dictates that they must withdraw $42,000 in year two just to maintain the same standard of living. If the financial markets experience a downturn at the exact same time inflation spikes, an economic scenario known as stagflation, the retiree is forced to sell a larger number of shares at depressed prices to generate that higher required cash flow. This phenomenon, known as sequence of returns risk, is the single greatest threat to a self-funded retirement. The portfolio is drained from both ends. The assets fall in value, while the cost of living forces higher distributions. To understand the practical impact of these forces, consider the theoretical case of a Canadian couple, David and Elena, who retired in Ontario in 2016. At the time of their retirement, their combined household expenses were $60,000 per year. They built their financial plan assuming a historical average inflation rate of 2%. For the first few years, the math behaved exactly as expected. Their cost crept up slowly. But as global supply chain disruptions and shifting monetary policies triggered higher inflation rates, their required budget expanded rapidly. By 2026, standard compounding inflation meant that maintaining the exact same lifestyle they enjoyed in 2016 now cost them over $74,000 annually. Their CPP and OAS benefits increased along the way, shielding a portion of their income. But the gap between their government benefits and their living expenses, the portion funded by their RRSPs, grew significantly. Because the prices of essential goods rose, David and Elena were forced to increase their RRSP withdrawals. These higher withdrawals increased their taxable income. This introduces another insidious layer of the inflation problem: bracket creep and benefit clawbacks. The Canadian tax system adjusts federal tax brackets for inflation annually, which helps prevent taxpayers from being pushed into higher brackets simply due to inflation. However, the Old Age Security Program has a specific income threshold, the OAS recovery tax, commonly known as the clawback. If a retiree's net world income exceeds this threshold, they must repay a portion of their OAS benefits. While the clawback threshold is indexed to inflation, a retiree who is forced to withdraw larger amounts from their RRSP just to pay for inflated living costs may inadvertently push their taxable income past that threshold. They are penalized for trying to maintain their purchasing power. When confronted with the reality of inflation, retirees often make behavioral errors that exacerbate the problem. The most common mistake is the flight to extreme safety, Terrified of market volatility, an individual might liquidate their equity holdings and move their entire retirement nest egg into cash or short-term bonds. While this eliminates the risk of a stock market crash, it guarantees a loss of purchasing power. Cash is the only asset class mathematically guaranteed to lose value over time in an inflationary environment. A second common mistake involves the strategic timing of the Canada Pension Plan. Canadians can choose to start receiving CPP as early as age 60 or delay it as late as age 70. Taking it at 60 results in a permanently reduced base amount, while waiting until 70 results in a significantly enhanced base amount. Many retirees take CPP early, fearing they will not live long enough to break even. What they fail to realize is that the annual inflation indexation is applied to the base amount. A 2.0% increase on a maximum pension taken at age 70 yields a much larger absolute dollar increase every single year than a 2.0% increase on a reduced pension taken at age 60. Delaying CPP is one of the most effective ways to purchase enhanced government-backed inflation insurance. A third mistake is failing to account for taxation in the inflation equation. Every dollar withdrawn from an RRSP or a RRIF is taxed as fully ordinary income. When inflation forces a retiree to withdraw more money, they are not just withdrawing the cost of the goods. They must withdraw enough to cover the cost of the goods, plus the marginal tax rate applied to the withdrawal. This creates a gross-up effect that drains portfolios faster than standard inflation calculators suggest. Defending a retirement plan against inflation requires a structural, mathematical approach rather than an emotional one. First, retirees must maintain an allocation to growth assets. Equities, real estate, and dividend-paying companies have historically been the most reliable engines for outpacing inflation over long time horizons. A retirement spanning 3 decades requires growth just as much as it requires capital preservation. Second, the strategic use of the tax-free savings account becomes paramount. Unlike RRSP withdrawals, money pulled from a TFSA does not count as taxable income. It does not trigger higher marginal tax rates, and crucially, it does not count toward the OAS clawback calculation. In high inflation years, using TFSA funds to cover excess living costs can protect a retiree from being penalized by the tax code. Third, retirees must redefine their view of government pensions. CPP and OAS should not be viewed merely as monthly checks, but as foundational risk management tools. Because they are guaranteed for life and indexed to the CPI, they act as the ultimate fixed income replacement. By optimizing the timing of these benefits, particularly by delaying CPP for the higher indexed base, a retiree shifts the burden of inflation risk away from their personal portfolio and back onto the federal government. Inflation is a permanent feature of the modern economic landscape. It cannot be negotiated with, and it cannot be ignored. For Canadian retirees, the goal is not to predict the exact percentage rate of inflation in any given year, but to construct a financial architecture robust enough to withstand its effects over decades. Government programs provide a powerful baseline of defense, but true financial security relies on how personal assets are positioned to grow, how withdrawals are sequenced to minimize taxation, and how longevity risk is managed. But deciding exactly when to activate those government benefits remains one of the most complex mathematical puzzles a retiree will face. While delaying the Canada Pension Plan offers superior inflation protection, taking it early offers immediate liquidity. How do you calculate the exact crossover point? Should you take your CPP at 60, 65, or 70? In our next documentary, we break down the exact math behind the CPP timing decision, running the numbers on life expectancy, tax implications, and investment opportunity costs so you can make the definitive choice for your financial future.